and welcome back to my channel. Just a quick note before I get started, it's thunderstorming again, so I apologize if you can hear any of that in the background. That's unfortunately just every day in the lovely Sunshine State. Anyway, welcome to my review of What Happened to Monday, a 2017 drama/mystery film starring Noomi Rapace, William Dafoe, Glenn Close, and directed by Tommy Wirkola. Our story starts in the future where, due to overpopulation, having a sibling is illegal. The Child Allocation Bureau removes siblings from their families and freezes them in cryogenic pods to be woken up when the world has recovered economically enough to support the increase in population. Already this is a fairly interesting premise that I haven't seen very often, but it isn't entirely unique either. It's also rooted in some reality with the one-child policy that was enforced in China not too long ago, that has since been repealed. Our conflict revolves around 7 identical sisters. Their mother, Karen Setman, knew that she was having septuplets and didn't want them to be taken away by the Child Allocation Bureau, so she went to an underground clinic to give birth. She passed away in childbirth, and the responsibility to raise her children went to her father, the 7 sisters' grandfather, Terence, played by Willem Dafoe. He named them after the days of the week and raised them to be one person, Karen Setman, named after their mother. Each girl is allowed to leave their house on their assigned day and be Karen for her day. Since they're little, they're taught that they can be whoever they want within the walls of their home, but outside they must adopt the persona of Karen Setman. This is the first introduction we get to identity that we see in the film. The 7 girls, identical and raised in the same way, develop completely unique identities. This also kind of alludes to a larger message about conforming to a societal expectation while being your true self in private. The girls' most important part of their day is the end-of-day meeting, where they show everything that happened in the previous day, but obviously it would be impossible to know every detail of every conversation. There's a pretty incredible sense of tension anytime Karen, quote-unquote, messes up a small detail, and it really nails home the fact that these girls are paranoid all the time that any little slip-up can cause them to be discovered. The lead actress does a fantastic job as all 7 siblings, and the CGI is pretty amazing. She feels like 7 totally different people. The sisters for the most part seem fairly one-dimensional, but as the movie goes on we get to see sides of the characters we didn't expect. The story really kicks off when Monday doesn't come home at the end of her day, and the sisters have to find out what happened to Monday. That's the title, yay! This creates a problem because the sisters have no clue what happened on her day, and they have to wing it. They're worried that she might be dead or injured, and having one of them show up alive and unharmed as Karen Setman anywhere might be a huge tip-off that there's more than one of them. Then, Tuesday disappears, and it's clear that someone is out to get them. The story is filled with action and tension, and some pretty incredible cinematography. But the biggest issue I have with this movie is that it is incredibly predictable. Predictable to the point of me knowing every single event that happens before it happens. The Prime Minister, and the one who created the Child Allocation Act and the Child Allocation Bureau, she claims to be putting kids in cryosleep, but very early in the movie she says that she has nightmares of hundreds of little burned bodies flowing from the building. This couldn't be more obvious, and I don't think it's actually trying to hide. However, it's clear that they're killing and burning the kids instead of cryogenically freezing them, but the movie still acts like this is some huge reveal in the 3rd act, and because we, the audience, know what is happening, we see Thursday standing by, recording, but otherwise doing nothing as a little girl dies. I understand that this is a necessary evil so that Thursday can use the horrifying recording to take down the Prime Minister, but it isn't particularly heroic. I also knew which sisters would die and in what order. I knew what happened to Monday about 5 minutes after she disappeared. But arguably, a lot of the story's flaws could be excused if you primarily view the story as a way to convey the deeper theme of identity. I'm not saying it's not ideal to have a strong story and a strong theme, but ultimately the story is a carrier for the theme. You would rather your carrier be of high quality with no holes, but if the theme gets there in one form or another, you could argue that the carrier was somewhat successful. So, it becomes clear that the people after them are from the Child Allocation Bureau, who have found out that all 7 sisters are still alive. They could just process the sisters and take them to the Cryogenic Freeze Center, aka the Death Center, but that would be publicized, and it would cause issues for our evil Prime Minister lady. They didn't want to make it public that 7 siblings survived to adulthood, because it would hurt the Prime Minister's position that multiple siblings could survive in the world. Instead, they send a super secret SEAL team to kill the sisters. The first of our sisters to die is Sunday. As she dies, she panics and cries, saying that she's not going to be okay. Her sisters tell her that she was always the believer and the optimist, and her last words are, "I don't know who I am." To have a character that is loosely characterized as a believer be killed that early on allows the story to swing in a strongly pessimistic direction, and the character that's strongly committed to being someone else never took the time to figure out who she really was. She dies unfulfilled, which is arguably an acceleration of the end if they had all lived a long life. Our tough girl Wednesday is the next to die, and similarly she is unfulfilled. She trains hard all the time and ties her identity to her physical strength. She trained her whole life, but is outmanned and outgunned, dying before she could really use her strength to protect herself and her sisters. It's kind of interesting that despite all her physical strength, she couldn't protect herself, not to mention that the sisters are so worried about being caught when a low-level Child Allocation Bureau agent comes to their house, who is eventually revealed to be a good guy, that they leave Wednesday stranded long enough to unintentionally impede her escape and ultimately cause her death. The next to die is Saturday. She was seen as our sexy party girl stereotype, but her identity was built on false perceptions of her sisters and false stories she tells about herself. She is creating an identity around herself, not just as Karen Setman, but as Saturday, that is used to protect herself. And this contributes to the idea that despite being one person, they all have individualized experiences. Saturday is not this super sultry, sexy party girl. But in the end, she could have possibly died fulfilled through her actions because she briefly realizes how to be vulnerable with her sister Thursday and be vulnerable with a lover as well before she dies. Friday is next. She is the techie hacker of the group. She kind of fades into the background next to her sister's stronger personalities, and she dies when she decides to stay behind and ambush the soldiers with an explosion and save her sister. She also places a heavy emphasis on trying to transfer the photos of her and her sisters to their tablet, claiming that this is the only evidence that they ever existed. This introduces the idea of attaching your identity to the impact that we have on those around us. For someone like Friday, who is quiet and introverted and generally quite forgettable, having her fear of being forgotten tied to her identity is pretty interesting, and it makes her trying to transfer the photos a bit more understandable in a life or death situation. Tuesday is one of the sisters who survives until the end, but the movie does try to pull off a she died fairly early on in the story. She's an interesting character because she has an avoidance of identity. She tries her hardest when she isn't being Karen Setman to be in a drug-induced haze. She's weak and anxious, but in exposing the Prime Minister she gains a bit of confidence and firmly gives herself a new identity at the end of the movie. Thursday is our main protagonist, and she represents both the repression and the rebellion of identity. When she was younger, she caused an accident on her skateboard that resulted in her losing the tip of her finger. Their grandfather had to make them all identical, otherwise, there would be a discrepancy that was fairly easy to prove. So, the grandfather cuts off the tip of all of her sister's index fingers to match. She was the catalyst to the severity of the idea of individuality when they were younger. Individuality causes punishment, so Thursday likely feels a guilt associated with expressing her individuality in a way that her sisters don't. She also doesn't enjoy the idea of being Karen Setman. She wants to be an individual, but she is tied to the guilt and responsibility she feels in relation to her sisters. Finally, Monday. Monday is our oldest sister, I believe, and she feels tied to her identity of Karen Setman, but more than that, she feels entitled to that identity. She hates that her sisters are stealing what she thinks of as her identity and shaping it to be more than what she wanted it to be. Monday is building a life for herself outside her sisters. She has a boyfriend, the CAB agent, is committing to her job, and she's revealed to be pregnant later in the movie, which would definitely cause a lot of issues for the sisters having to pretend to be pregnant. So Monday sells her sisters out. Monday being pregnant ties children into identity. People will often refer to themselves as a mother and tie it to their core beliefs. For example, as a mother, I believe vaccines should be mandatory. Whatever. Monday represents the ultimate conformity to the system, but even she is willing to break from the unfair system to save the lives of her children, twins. This shows that despite Monday wanting to conform and believing in the system, it's still a broken system. In the end, Monday dies, but her identity is carried on through her children, and Thursday takes the name Karen Setman as an acceptance of her identity, but on her own terms. She's Karen Setman not because she has to be, but because she wants to be, and she can shape that into whatever she wants. Ultimately, this isn't a great movie. It falls into a lot of sci-fi tropes, which is predictable, and has generally weak characterization that takes a lot of leaps to really see any kind of growth in many of the characters. Our lead actress does her best to work with the bare-bones characterization, but in the end, most of the characters are a little flat. Some interesting ideas were raised, but ultimately not expanded on in an extremely innovative way. The supporting cast is also doing their best. Willem Dafoe and Glenn Close give excellent performances, and their characters are some of the more interesting in terms of shaping the main character's view of their identity. It's a bit of a rote-by-the-numbers sci-fi thriller with some fun moments and an interesting premise that ultimately falls short. The Netflix poster was dope, though. Overall, 7 sisters out of 10. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day and all that jazz.